We are only 2 weeks away from the start of football season, so join me for the Hall of Fame game between the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns, as we'll be live streaming the action then. More preseason streams to be announced soon. And now, on with our feature presentation. I don't know why this was the case, but it seemed like the 1969 offseason in pro football was the year where everyone just decided to retire, and then come back as though nothing had ever happened, as though they never made the retirement announcement in the first place. You know how in the very early seasons of South Park, they killed off Kenny every episode, and then he would come back the very next episode, as though what happened last episode didn't matter at all? That's what the 1969 offseason was like, because it really felt like every big player in football decided that they were going to walk away from the sport forever and hang up the cleats for good, and then said, never mind, guess what? I'm back, folks. There were a ton of players that did this. I've even done multiple videos on players doing this during the 1969 offseason. Baltimore Colts quarterback Earl Morrall, literally the year after he got the Colts to the Super Bowl and was named the MVP of the National Football League, announced that he was retiring, only to come back and play in 1969. You can learn more about that situation by clicking the card in the upper right corner. New York Jets quarterback Joe Namath, off of a season where he won Super Bowl MVP and guided the Jets and the American Football League to their first World Championship ever, announced that he was retiring, only to come back and play in 1969. You can learn more about that situation by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, at least with those two aforementioned retirements, there was a concrete reason for why the players hung it up and then changed their minds. In Earl Morrall's case, he had some business at his other job to take care of. That got sorted out, and he came back, as though nothing had happened. In Joe Namath's case, he got into a feud with NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle regarding the ownership of his bar and its ties with the Mafia, where Rozelle essentially forced Namath to give up the bar. So Namath said, "Screw you, I'm retiring." That got sorted out, and he came back as though nothing had happened. At least in situations like that, a player retired because of something, and then came back when that something was sorted out. It was a cause and effect situation, as is the case with most retirements and subsequent unretirements. A player retires for X reason, and then comes back because X reason is no longer an issue, or because Y reason was a more compelling thing than the X reason. Which is what makes this situation involving this player right here, the subject of our story today, all the more bizarre and all the more confusing. This man is Bill Mathis, and much like Joe Namath and Earl Morrall, he announced that he was retiring and was never playing the game again, and then changed his mind and came back and played in 1969. However, unlike Namath and Morrall, or just about any retirement and subsequent unretirement from that offseason, I genuinely have no idea why he retired in the first place. And I don't mean that I couldn't find any information or any quotes, or it just wasn't reported on. I mean that, based on what exactly Mathis said, I don't know why on earth he walked away from the game in the first place, because there was legitimately no logical reason for him to retire. Nothing about this made any sense, and we're going to take a deep dive into that today. Because this is the story behind what might just be, considering the circumstances and the bizarre nature of it, the strangest retirement in the over 6-year history of the New York Jets franchise. Before I talk about the actual retirement and the unretirement in question, we need some context to understand who the subject of our story is, how good he was, and how important he was to this New York Jets organization. It's actually kind of shocking that this man is not a member of the New York Jets Ring of Honor, considering how important he was to the team for so many years. Because this man right here is running back and fullback Bill Mathis, and he was an original member on the team, all the way back in 1960 when they were known as the New York Titans and were playing in the inaugural season of the American Football League. In fact, by this point, he was one of the last players remaining on the Jets who was on that original Titans team that was a poorly run mess of an organization and that played at the Polo Grounds under a completely different name. My, how things changed by the late 60s. In the first 9 seasons that Mathis played, all with the Jets, he was an instrumental part of that backfield, as when you think of the Jets' backfield from back then, you think of Matt Snell, you think of Emerson Boozer, and you think of Bill Mathis. Again, 2 of those 3 are in the Ring of Honor, so if you want to start the campaign to get Mathis in there posthumously, I'm totally down. He was a 2-time AFL All-Star, making it in 1961 and in 1963. During the 1967 season, he averaged an astonishingly high 6.5 yards per touch, which was the top total in the AFL amongst all qualified players. By the time the 1968 season was over, he had just under 5,000 yards from scrimmage and 33 rushing touchdowns. After the Jets were on top of the football world, following their stunning victory over the Baltimore Colts at Super Bowl III, Bill Mathis was the franchise leader in just about every single category, and if he wasn't number 1, then he was an awfully close second. He was the all-time leader with 33 rushing touchdowns. He was the all-time leader with 1,079 touches, constantly getting a hold of the football and making an impact with the team. And he was the all-time leader in games played, having played a whopping 123 games with the team, having not missed a game since the 1962 season, being a true Iron Man in the sport. Literally every game that the Jets played under the name the New York Jets, he played in at that point. Long story short, Bill Mathis was a really good player. He was a solid runner who could break one in the second level, and who could bulldoze his way to the end zone down by the goal line. He was a good receiver, and was a nice safety net for Joe Namath or whoever else was at quarterback, and he was just a great teammate and a great player to have. Again, I don't know how you can have a Jets Ring of Honor with Boozer and Snell and not Mathis, because that was the 3-headed monster, and Mathis deserves bonus points for being an original member of the team, but I digress. However, when the 1969 offseason rolled around, and when head coach Weeb Ewbank was getting ready to have the team come back for camp, there was one player in particular that was not going to be there to help the Jets defend their AFL title, and heck, their world title. That man? Bill Mathis. After 9 years, and after being a lifetime member of the organization since day one, alongside wide receiver Don Maynard and linebacker Larry Grantham, both of whom are also in the Jets Ring of Honor, Mathis was hanging it up for good. He assured the Jets that he was not coming back, that he was on the wrong side of 30, and after the worst season of his career from a volume perspective, as he had a career-low 208 rushing yards and a career-low 14.9 rushing yards per game, that he was going to go out on top as a champion. Said head coach Weeb Ewbank on the news, "We'll miss Mathis. He was very valuable and gave great performances for the Jets." But just like that, for a franchise legend, his time with the team was officially done. Guess how long that retirement lasted? Not even 2 weeks. Seriously, not even a whole 2 weeks. Because just as quickly as Mathis handed in his retirement papers and called it a career, he was back with the Jets as though nothing had ever happened. He was going to play a 10th season with the team and was going to give it one last go. And on one hand, this was great news for the Jets. They got to bring back a key veteran leader who, even though he didn't have his most efficient season in 1968 and was showing signs of decline, was still a valuable piece of the puzzle for the team in its championship season, catching a few critical passes during the Super Bowl and scoring 6 touchdowns, which was the third most on the team, only behind Don Maynard and Matt Snell. On the other hand, there were obvious questions about, well, why Mathis hung it up in the first place. I mean, we're glad that he's back, but why'd you leave to begin with? And folks, when I tell you that Bill Mathis gave the most nonsensical reason for his retirement imaginable, I am not kidding. Oh man, I am not kidding. Now, I want to be very clear. You can retire and make a personal decision like that for any reason that you want. This is not me invalidating what Mathis thought was a good reason to retire. If he wanted to walk away from the game, whether it was because he felt he couldn't produce anymore, or because he wanted to go out as a champion, or because he didn't want to put any more wear and tear on his body, or because he just didn't feel like playing anymore, or because he wanted to become a musician, which actually happened with another Jets player, or heck, he wanted to move somewhere in Europe, then fine. But this isn't about that. Because for Bill Mathis, his reasoning for retiring in the first place was, well, I have no clue. Seriously, I have no clue why he even made the decision and wanted to retire. Said Mathis, the Jets have been so good to me that I decided to play ball. I miss the game and miss being with the players very much. So you announced 2 weeks ago that you were done, and under no circumstances outside of something crazy would you return. But you came back because the Jets were good to you? You missed the game? And you missed being around your teammates? Huh, that's odd. Again, you weren't really away from the game long enough to miss it. You missed maybe a couple of days tops. Were you out of shape? No, according to reports, Mathis was working out every single day. Were you forced into retirement by the organization? No. Weeb Ewbank said, I never wanted him to retire in the first place. Did it have to do with money? No. Mathis flat out said, in a quote that I'm sure would make the Players Association absolutely thrilled if it happened today, they don't even have to pay me. So you were willing to come out of retirement and play for free because you love the coach, you love the organization, you love the players, and you love the sport. Which raises the obvious question. Why the heck did you retire in the first place? You know what this is like? This is like if you're invited to a party and you're having a really great time. The vibes are good, all of your friends are there, and you're just having fun and enjoying yourself. Then, you tell everyone that you've got to leave because you don't want to be there anymore. An hour later, you come back to the party, and everyone's happy that you returned, but they ask why you left, and you say, well, I love you guys, and I love the food, and I love the vibes, and I love the music, and I never wanted to leave in the first place. You're waiting for the but to happen. Like something like, but I got a family emergency that I thought was important, but turned out to be a false alarm. Or, but I felt like I was getting sick, but turns out I just needed some fresh air for a bit and I'm totally fine. Or, but I had to leave because I had to get up early next day, but my boss texted me and said, change of plans, I'm not on the schedule for tomorrow, so I can stay out later than I thought. However, the but never comes. The reason for why you left in the first place isn't just unclear in the sense that you didn't tell anyone why, because you didn't feel like you owed an explanation to people, but rather, the reason for why you left seems to contradict the very action of leaving in the first place. You left the party for a bit because you were having a good time with your friends? How does that make sense? And the same thing applies here with Bill Mathis. You left the Jets because you were still in good physical shape, your coach wanted you to play, you were so happy playing for them that you didn't even feel the need to get paid, and you love being around everyone and playing the sport? Again, you can see why this is so confusing, right? I'm really trying to follow the logic as best as I can, and I just can't. This is like saying I loved a movie and they give me it 1 star out of 5. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, no matter how you want to slice it. For what it's worth, the 1969 season would officially be the last time that Mathis played for the Jets and played professional football, as he was done for good after a season where he actually had his best numbers from a rushing yards and a yards per carry standpoint since 1965, so it was his top total in the Super Bowl era. When Weeb Eubanks said that he never wanted Bill Mathis to retire, it's not hard to see what he meant, because Mathis was still an efficient player out of the backfield who could contribute in a lot of ways for the team, even going as far as scoring the only touchdown of the game in a Week 9 victory during the month of November against their in-state rival and divisional rival, the Buffalo Bills. And by the time Bill Mathis was done playing football after 1969, his final numbers were an impressive 10 seasons, over 5,300 yards from scrimmage, and 46 total touchdowns, which gives him the 6th most in franchise history to this day, with the other 5 guys ahead of him in that category being Don Maynard, Wesley Walker, Emerson Boozer, Curtis Martin, and Freeman McNeil, all of whom are once again in the Jets' Ring of Honor. Seriously, Jets, get on that. But the 10th and final season of Bill Mathis' career might have been the strangest one of the bunch, simply because of the bizarre way that it started. Because Bill Mathis almost didn't play the 1969 season because he was enjoying his time with the Jets too much and was feeling valued by the sport, his teammates, and his coach? Yeah, we'll go with that, I guess. I've got nothing. I give up. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.